Okay, so when you first open Live for the first time, you're like, what is this? So this is what they call the session view. So Ableton has two views, the session view and the arrangement view that you can actually just access by pressing your tab key. And this is more like the ones that we see on every other DAW. So let's go back to the session view, and then let's go over just some basics of Ableton. So right at the top here, you have your link button, so that if you have any other apps or anything that it's Bluetooth, you can link it to Ableton and then be synchronized. So if you're playing something on your apps, then you can have them synchronized to play at the same time. It's very useful for live performance. So right next to it, you have a tab button, and then here you can tap your tempo, or you can just enter it manually next to it. So let's see, 90. And then right next to it, you have your time signature, which usually is 4x4. And right next to it, you have your metronome, which you also can have a counting for when you're recording or playing. And then next to it, you have your quantization settings, which is very useful for live performance. So next to it, you have your regular transport, you have your play, stop, your record button. This record button will record into your arrangement view, not into your session view. And then you have here this other record button, that this is for your session view. Over here you have your loop, so you can activate your loop. This is more for arrangement view as well. So if you go back to arrangement view, then you can see here that you created a loop, and then it's just going to play that 8 bars. And then over here you have your pencil, which is useful for your MIDI editor, so you can draw notes. So here it's the MIDI keyboard. This tells you that there's a MIDI keyboard plugged in, or that you can use your computer keys to play. So if I play here, let's see, if I touch my computer keys, you see that there's some signal coming in over here. So next to it, if you deactivate that, then your computer keys turn into a whole new set of control keys. So you can hit the key here, and then you can map pretty much any of these parameters to any of your computer keys. And then you have access to mapping your keys on the computer or your MIDI controllers by hitting any of these two. So if I hit MIDI, everything that's turned blue can be mapped to any control just by clicking. Let's say I want to map this fader. Just click on it, move your fader on your USB controller, and then a message will pop up here. So you'll see, once I move my fader, you see that it's mapped to my fader in Ableton. Next to it, you have your CPU usage, which is really important to be on the look for that number. We'll talk about that later. So on the left side, you have your browser, which you can search. It has a search function. Or here under categories, you have pretty much all the sounds and instruments that come in with your Ableton Live version, whichever you have. So you have your instruments, you have your audio effects, you have your MIDI effects, you have your plugins. Those are third-party plugins that you have, like Native Instruments, any other plugins that you use outside Ableton. So Ableton comes with clips that you can use. Clips are a little longer. They're more a short clip, like a loop. And then it also comes with some sample libraries that you can use. Here under places, anything that you download from the website, like any packs, any drum loops, or anything you download from the website, it'll show up down here. And then you can always add them by clicking this little add folder and searching your computer, and then you can have them here just for easy access. Click on this little arrow down here, you have an info view. So whatever you put your mouse over, it tells you the name, so it tells you that this is the track activator, and then this pretty much mutes or unmutes your track. So it activates your track or deactivates your track. So it's very useful just to start learning what everything does. And then next to it, it's where you drag and drop your instruments. So let's talk a bit about what's in the channel strip or your track. So here you can choose MIDI from. This is more when it comes to MIDI, it's more if you have any outboard MIDI controllers or MIDI like synthesizers. And then you have your in, auto, and off. So I always have it in auto just so I can hear the track back. And then, like I said before, you can always send audio to any other track in the in your session. So right on there we have the send button. So this is to send a copy of that signal, of that dry or process signal that you have in your channel strip to any of these return tracks. And then you have your volume fader right here. You have your pan knob, so you can pan your sound left to right. One thing I like about Ableton, it's like you click on it. If you have it on the left, you click on it, and then you press delete, and it goes back to 0. Then you have your track activator, so it's like a mute or unmute. You have your solo, so you will only hear that track, and then you have your record activate button. Okay. So Ableton actually works with clips. So when you open Ableton for the first time, it comes up on the session view, and then you'll have 2 MIDI tracks, 2 audio tracks, 2 return tracks, and a master track. All this fitting into the master track by default. So Ableton works with clips. So all these are clip slots. On every track you'll have multiple clip slots. You can always add more rows, but only one clip can play per track. So let's actually go into the MIDI track here and add an instrument. So let's go to the simpler. Let's add a piano. So if I double click on it and I have my track selected, it'll populate down here on the device view. So then now if I play, I have my MIDI, and it'll always like track activate right when you select an instrument. So if I double click, by default Ableton will create a 1-bar loop and it will open the MIDI editor. You can also toggle between the MIDI editor and the device view with the shift tab button. So here I already have a chord progression that I actually created. Let's lower these volumes a little bit because they're going to be crazy. If I double click on the clip, then it'll open my MIDI editor. If you hit fold, it'll only show you the notes that you're playing. So any note that you're not using is not going to show up. And then if we go next here, you have these options, these little dots down here. It's an L and an E. That's more control that you have over that MIDI clip. So you have your 4x4 time signature. You can add some grooves. We'll talk in details about this. You have your launch, which pretty much will tell how that clip will behave. Trigger is just the normal looping of that clip. You can also hit gate, and then what gate will do, let's hit this little square button here to stop playing the clip. If I click on the clip, then it'll only play as long as I'm holding it down. So it'll only play for a little bit, and then if I release, then it'll stop. Toggle, what it'll do is like you have to click on it on the clip to start, click to stop. Repeat will just repeat the loop for a number of bars that you specify. Here you click to activate or deactivate your loop. So if the loop is deactivated, it will only play that one time. But if you have the loop on, then it'll keep playing over and over. Here you can specify where your loop starts. Here right now it's at position 1. It's telling you the length, which is a 4-bar loop. But if I want to make this a 2-bar loop, I can just dial it in. I can just double click and enter the number, and then it'll only play those 2 bars. And then you have your envelopes, which pretty much you can have control, pitch, volume, etc., etc., etc. We'll get into details later with that. So now let's drag into the audio track one of the clips that is already loaded with Ableton. Right on your browser, on the categories, let's go to clip, and then let's just drag a clip. Let's do this 80s beat. And then if I double click, it'll open the audio editor. Your controls are pretty much the same. The only thing that changes here is you have the opportunity to reverse your clip. You have control over your volume, the volume of the clip. So if you have a clip that is too hot, then you can just lower it. You can transpose the clip, works by semitones. So the warp, it's to align the beat to the tempo of the song. So the markers will tell you where the beat is, and then you can move around. Let's go ahead and drag a few more clips. If you click on a clip and it's not playing, you can hit the click to preview and it'll start playing. If this is too loud, you can go over here to your master track, and this little knob with the headphones, that's to control your metronome volume and also the preview clip. So let's drag another clip here, and then let's just kind of like perform on your session view and then record it into your arrangement view so you can see what I'm talking about. So Ableton works with clips, and then they're in rows. So you can only play one clip per track, but then you can play multiple across, and then you can play them individually, or you can play them from the master track as a macro in rows, and those rows are called scenes. So if I click here the play button on the master track, then you see that it'll play all of them. If I click on that little square button at the bottom here, it'll stop playing. So let's go here to the top transport, and then let's hit the record. Right now we can do, if I turn on the metronome, I can have a counting of 1 bar before I start recording. So then it'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it'll start recording. So we'll see. 3, 4. So let's play my 1 loop. And as you can see, I'm not playing on time. So then if I hit the stop button here, and then I hit the tab key to go to my arrangement view, and I go back to the beginning, I still hear the session view. So then if I go up here on this right top corner of the timeline, I click on that little button, and now I can hear my arrangement. And then here pretty much you can move. Here I started a little bit later, so I can move this to start at 5, and then this one will start at 9, and then I started my keywords later. And if this is a loop, you can just drag along your loops, or you can just like hit the copy paste, which is, or duplicate, which is the command D, and then you'll duplicate your clips. So when you open your preferences, here on the audio tab you have your audio input device. If you have an interface, it should show up here. If not, for your audio input device, if you're not using any interface, I would rather do no device. And then it'll always default to your built-in outputs. And that is, I always like to put no device just so it won't create a feedback, because then it will feed from your microphone on your computer. But in this case, since I'm using, so when we go to latency, here you can add select the appropriate buffer size. This controls how quickly Ableton can record and playback sounds. The higher it's set, the bigger the delay between what you're playing and what you're hearing back. If you set it too low, your computer has to work much harder, and this will result in pops and clicks. So if you're playing and you're just mixing at that point of mixing, or just listening to this track, and you start hearing like this pops and clicks, then it's your buffer size is too low and the computer is working too hard. So I like to use lower buffer sizes, more for recording, so then you have less delay on your headphones. So this is good for singers, like, so you don't have that weird delay and then it takes you off the track. And then higher buffer sizes, I use them more for playback or mixing. And then here we also have, you can change the feel and look of Ableton. You have your MIDI tab where you can pretty much, if you have any external USB keyboards or controllers, here's where you'll be setting them up, In the File Folders tab, you can scan your computer down here for any third-party plugins. You have your record preferences. I think Ableton by default starts at AIFF, and then I like to always record everything in WAV. It takes much space in your hard drive, but it's a better quality.